There's something deeply unsettling about total darkness. It's in the dark that our oldest fears find room to grow, fueled by uncertainty and the unknown. For many, the idea of supernatural creatures lurking in the shadows is more than just a fantasy. It's a scary possibility, rooted in ancient legends that have spanned centuries and cultures. Throughout history, myths have emerged about beings that feed on the life force of humans, figures we now know as vampires. These legends don't just reflect humanity's fascination with the macabre, they also reveal a lot about our own fears and desires. While modern portrayals of vampires are often glamorous and seductive, their origins are much darker. The earliest stories of these creatures trace back to beliefs about the undead, known as revenants. These were seen as restless souls returning to Earth due to bad deeds committed in life or unresolved issues. People believed these entities, bloated and decomposing, would emerge from the ground at night to attack the living, feeding on their blood. The image was grotesque, far from the sleek vampires we picture today. Cultures around the world shaped their own versions of these creatures. In Hebrew mythology, Lilith was a female demon who roamed the night, sucking the blood of babies and pregnant women. In ancient Greece, there were tales of men cursed by the gods, transformed into nocturnal predators as punishment for their forbidden desires. These stories show that, regardless of cultural differences, the fear of beings that blur the line between life and death is universal. But what's so fascinating about these creatures? Why do we keep telling their stories, even in an era dominated by science and technology? Maybe it's because they represent something bigger than just monsters. They're symbols of our own fears, death, forbidden desire, the unknown. And so, as the legends evolve, they continue to echo fundamental truths about the human condition. Since the beginning of time, fear of the unknown has always haunted humanity. From the shadows of night came stories of creatures that defied the laws of life and death. These mysterious figures fed on the vital energy of the living, becoming symbols of terror and fascination. Though we now know them as vampires, their origins are much older and varied. Back in the day, many cultures believed that people who led wicked lives or rejected religious traditions could return from the dead as evil entities. These creatures were seen as nighttime predators, coming back to feast on human blood. In some regions, it was believed that bodies left unprotected after death could be taken over by malevolent spirits or cursed by wild animals, turning them into vampires. The earliest accounts of these beings were nothing like the stylish images we have today. On the contrary, they were described as swollen corpses with dark, rotting skin, resembling the early stages of decomposition. These entities were said to sleep underground during the day and emerge at night to wreak havoc. To identify them, people would look for strange signs in cemeteries, like holes above graves, which indicated supernatural activity. Legends also suggested that certain individuals, like practitioners of magic or rebels against faith, were at higher risk of becoming vampires after death. A lack of proper funeral rituals was another factor that sparked fears. Many communities developed specific practices, like decapitating bodies or burying them upside down, in an attempt to prevent the dead from returning as threats. Throughout history, certain individuals left such deep marks that their cruel and mysterious actions became intertwined with supernatural legends. Among these iconic figures are Vlad the Impaler and Elizabeth Bathory, whose real-life stories seem to leap straight out of a dark tale. Though they weren't vampires in the literal sense, their brutal lives and morbid obsessions helped fuel the collective imagination about bloodthirsty beings. Vlad, known for his extreme cruelty, was feared by his enemies and admired by his allies. He was infamous for using torture methods involving stakes, leaving his victims writhing in public display as a way to intimidate others. Rumor has it he had a peculiar relationship with the suffering of others, and some accounts suggest he even dipped bread in the blood of his victims before eating it as a show of absolute power. This mix of brutality and charisma made him a near-legendary figure, often associated with the myth of Dracula. Elizabeth Bathory, a Hungarian noblewoman from the 16th century, is remembered for her even more macabre practices. She was accused of torturing and murdering young women, supposedly in search of secrets to preserve her eternal youth. Stories claim she performed bizarre rituals, bathing in the blood of her victims in an attempt to keep her skin flawless. Though she was never formally tried for these crimes, the stories about her continued to circulate, amplifying her image as a woman obsessed with life and beauty at any cost. These historical figures show how human cruelty can cross the boundaries of acceptability, creating narratives that echo in vampire legends. The idea of leaders or powerful people using their status to exploit the vulnerable reflects the collective fear of abuse of power. At the same time, their stories reveal something deeper, the human desire to transcend mortality and escape the natural limits of existence. Though Vlad and Elizabeth weren't supernatural creatures, their lives are examples of how human behavior can inspire myths that last for centuries, shaping our modern view of vampires as complex and terrifying beings. Over the centuries, the stories about these night creatures took on new forms, reflecting changes in how society viewed fear and the unknown. Initially, the tales were raw and brutal, but over time, human imagination transformed these beings into more complex and captivating figures. This shift wasn't just the result of ancient legends, but also the influence of writers and artists who shaped their meanings. In the 19th century, literary narratives gave vampires a new role in human stories. Instead of just scaring people, they began to fascinate. An important work published early in this period explored for the first time the idea of a charming and seductive predator capable of deceiving victims before striking. This new vision helped popularize the image of the vampire as someone shrouded in mystery and elegance, far from the grotesque descriptions of earlier times. Later, another iconic creation solidified this image by presenting an aristocratic and powerful character whose presence dominated any room. This work further amplified the dark aura of these entities, turning them into symbols of forbidden desire and eternal decadence. From there, the myth spread quickly, inspiring other forms of art and culture. These representations reveal a lot about the historical moment in which they were created. During periods of great scientific and industrial progress, the fascination with these creatures can be interpreted as a reaction to unchecked advancement. They embody the secrets hidden beneath the surface of modernity, questioning the boundaries between the human and the supernatural. Today, vampires continue to evolve, appearing in movies, TV shows, and books that explore themes like love, immortality, and identity. Each new version brings reflections on human behavior, showing that these creatures remain relevant because they touch on universal questions that never stop intriguing us. Throughout the ages, vampires have transcended their origins as figures of terror to become reflections of our own deepest desires and fears. They are much more than night creatures. They represent questions that continue to intrigue us. What does it mean to be human? What is the price of immortality? How far are we willing to go to escape the limitations imposed by life? These questions remain relevant because they touch on universal truths about our existence. Today, the stories of these entities continue to evolve, shaped by the lens of different eras and cultures. Whether as symbols of uncontrollable power or metaphors for forbidden desire, vampires occupy a unique place in our collective imagination. They remind us that, even in an era dominated by science and technology, there is still room for the unknown. Perhaps that's exactly why these legends endure. They invite us to explore the dark side of the human mind, the part that can't be fully explained by equations or theories. But do these creatures exist only in our stories, or is there something beyond fiction? After all, many of the conditions and events that gave rise to ancient legends have rational explanations today. However, this doesn't diminish the fascination we feel for them. On the contrary, it reinforces the fact that vampires are manifestations of something very real: our emotions, our fears, and our aspirations. So, as we dive into the shadows of these narratives, it's worth reflecting. Are the real vampires within us, hidden behind masks of normalcy? Or maybe they're lurking in places where we least expect them? In the end, the answer matters less than the impact these ideas have on us. What remains certain is that, as long as there are mysteries in the world, vampires will continue to live not just in old tales, but also in the depths of our imagination.